Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me in the back? Great. Welcome to Food Literacy for All in 2018. We're very excited to see you all and to start this class for this semester. We have some introductory remarks about the personnel in the class, about a few of the logistics, and a bit of announcements and housekeeping. So first of all, we want to start out with introductions of those of us who are the team that is putting this class on. So in addition to myself and my co-teacher, Malik Yakini, we have 3 other people to introduce you to. So we're going to start off with that right away. So I'll start with myself. I'm Catherine Badgley. I'm a professor in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology here on campus and also in the residential college. My background is in the natural sciences. My research interests encompass the history of life. I'm actually a paleontologist and I study fossil mammals and deep time, but that interest actually also connects me to food and agriculture and the food system because the biggest threat to biodiversity today is food and agriculture. And the fossil record gives us a lot of insights about extinction, and I'm very concerned that we're in the threshold of another mass extinction, and much of that is coming about because of our food system. So it's that connection that drew me into a very substantially long engagement with the food system. And so I've been teaching classes about and doing research about the food system for about 20 years, and I'm a farmer now. I live on a farm about 22 miles west of here. First thing I do every morning is go out and break the ice on a big bucket of water for draft horses and feed them. So I'm seriously involved in a farm. It's not a commercial farm, it's a subsistence farm, but it's given me a lot of insights into certain aspects of the food system, not only through my own experience growing food, but also being part of a farming community. And so that's been very, very interesting. Malik.
Good evening, how's everyone? Good, my name is Malik Yakini, and I am not an academic. Let me start by saying that. I like to say that too. And that's not any insult to those who are academics. But most of my adult life, I've been an activist in Detroit. I have been involved in what back in the day we used to call the Black Liberation Movement. Now I think the more politically correct term is social justice. I can kind of get with that. And for about 24 years, I ran an independent African-centered school in Detroit. And in the late 90s, we started getting involved in serious gardening with the students at the school because we thought that students having the opportunity to interact with nature would be a way of them kind of understanding their connection to the rest of creation. And so really, there were 2 levels to this. On the most mundane level, we think it's important for people to be self-reliant and to break our dependence on the multinational corporations that feed us and to know how to grow tomatoes and other things that we consume. But on the deeper level, we thought it was important for students to have the opportunity to get involved with growing food and thus get involved with understanding their relationship with nature. So my involvement grew from operating this gardening program and developing a food security curriculum at the school to eventually this food work really taking over my life, where by 2011 I had to make the decision to either continue as director of the school or resign and pursue the food justice work full time. So that's what I decided to do, to follow my passion. And since 2011, I've been the full-time executive director of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, an organization that I co-founded in 2006. We're probably left of left. And so I'll kind of give you the forewarning now for those who might not be aware of our organization or perhaps who haven't heard me speak before. And so we always try to make sure that we talk about 3 major systems of oppression that not only impact the food system, but impact every other area of American life, and that would be the system of white supremacy, the system that continues to give privilege, unearned privilege to people who are defined as being white, the system of capitalism, the economic system that we live in, which commodifies everything, and patriarchy, the system that still somehow suggests that men are more qualified to lead than women. So you'll hear that theme repeated over these next 12 weeks, and every opportunity I have a chance to dig a little bit deeper into those, I'll do that piece.
Thank you very much, Malik. It's a privilege to have you with us.
Thank you.
Lilly, could you please say some things about yourself? Lilly Plus.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. My name is Lilly Fink Shapiro. I'm the program manager for the U of M Sustainable Food Systems Initiative. We're a group on campus, so there's a lot of different food systems groups on campus. There's a lot of student groups some of you are probably involved with. There's groups in dining. There's groups who are across campus doing really great work. The Sustainable Food Systems Initiative is really on the academic side of the food systems work. So we have, some of you may know, we have a minor in sustainable food systems. We have a new graduate certificate in sustainable food systems. This course is one of our main activities. And I am so devoted to this course. I'm here with my almost 3-week-old little baby, Emil. So this course has been in the making. This is the second year of it. It's been in the makings for several years. It's really exciting that we're able to make it happen again. And one of my favorite parts of my job in this course is getting to straddle academia and working with incredible community partners. Certainly Malik is one of them. My background is in public health, and I came to graduate school originally to study sustainable food systems from many different disciplinary lenses. So I'm thrilled to be here in this position and clearly really love this class. So excited to see you all on Tuesdays.
Thank you very much, Lilly. Great. Hold on to that. Yep. Mariah, another member of our team.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mariah Van Orman. It's hard to follow Emil. What a welcome to the world, right? But I'm a graduate student. I'm a second-year master's student at the Ford School of Public Policy. I'm interested in health and sustainability and the intersection in the policy world. So my role for this course is to support a lot of the logistics and be behind the scenes. I'm happy to help your journey throughout the course. A bit on my experience. Before grad school, I worked with food policy on the local government level. So for Chicago Public Schools, I helped develop the Farm to School program and initiated the early stages of the Good Food Purchasing program for this district and the city. And then this past summer, as a public service fellow with the David Bonnet Foundation, I worked with the city of Detroit in initiating some of the groundwork for food policy with their brand new Office of Sustainability. So policies, what I'm interested in, and I'm really excited to join you all for another year. And I'll pass this over to Fern.
Please.
Yep, I'm Fern. I'm excited to be your GSI for those of you who are enrolled in this as a course for credit. You can come to me with your iClicker questions. I'm going to be holding office hours at 4:30 to 5:30 on Monday every week, right about when students email with the most questions, so hopefully that'll be a helpful time. My connection to food systems is my thesis work right now. I'm doing research on a shade-grown organic coffee farm in Mexico and climbing trees and looking at ants and other arthropod communities in those trees. But I worked for many years as an activist after I graduated from college, and then I kind of came around to food systems realizing that people's connection to the land all over the world was very, very important, and that reforming food systems is really critical to creating transformative change. So.
Great. Thank you so much. Hold on to that. Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you. Well, now you've met the team that is bringing you this class, and some in all sorts of ways, and we really couldn't do it without all of us. And so we wanted to make sure that you got a chance to meet all the team that is behind us. We want to say a little bit about what has brought this course here. Now, Lilly just said something about the sustainable food systems at the University of Michigan. I'll ask her maybe just to improvise a little bit more, if you'd like. You've already reported on a number of things here, but you want to say a bit more, Lilly? You can say it from where you're sitting, if that's helpful.
Just to let all of you know that there's over 60 affiliated faculty and staff across campus in all different schools and departments who study food systems. If you haven't checked out the SFSI website, the Sustainable Food Systems Initiative website, you can find them all listed there, as well as a list of courses. Certainly this one is listed, as well as many, many more. And yeah, so there's our website, and if you're also interested in other kind of going-ons on campus, we have a pretty good social media presence. So Facebook and Twitter is a good way to keep up with both this class and just things going on throughout the semester.
Great, thank you, Lily. Great. A little bit more about the goals of the Sustainable Food Systems Initiative here, that we're trying to engage a very interdisciplinary mixture of students, faculty, and community activities at both local and global levels. So some of our students and faculty are working, here in Michigan. Others are working in countries all over around the world on both ecological, political, and economic and social aspects of the food system. And we feel that this very interdisciplinary perspective that is looking at both the natural science as well as the kind of food justice aspects of the food system gives the University of Michigan, at least in the state of Michigan, a very distinct perspective on the food system that distinguishes us, the kinds of approaches that we bring to this big topic from those that are the main approaches that you'd find, for example, at Michigan State University. I should say we also have very good collegial relationships with colleagues and collaborators there, and also at Wayne State University. Before we get to the goals of the course, actually, I was wondering, Malik, if you could say a little bit more about, not only about the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, but also about our other Detroit partners.
Sure. So one of the reasons I was very interested in being involved in this class is because it shares information not only with the academic community, but also with the Detroit community. And so there are two Detroit partners that are helping to plan and co-sponsor this course, and that would be the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network and the Detroit Food Policy Council. The Detroit Food Policy Council is primarily playing the role of doing outreach for a number of the speakers who will be speaking here on Tuesday night, and either on the Monday prior or the Wednesday after, we'll be doing either a presentation or book signing or tour or something in the city of Detroit. So again, we thought that this academic community partnership was really important. So the Detroit Food Policy Council was founded in 2009, and it officially serves as an advisory body, or it's supposed to serve, maybe I should say, as an advisory body to the mayor and to the city council in the city of Detroit. It is responsible for monitoring the implementation of the City of Detroit's food security plan, and also for looking at gaps that exist, because there's many groups in Detroit who are doing food-related work. So the Food Policy Council is to identify where there's gaps that those groups aren't addressing, and perhaps where there's redundancies as well. So in some ways, the Detroit Food Policy Council has become an umbrella organization to gather much of the food-related work in the city of Detroit.
Thanks very much. Yeah. So for those of you enrolled in the course, want to say a little bit about our goals, and we have elaborated on these further in documents that are posted on the Canvas website, which you should all have access to. So this is a very interdisciplinary introduction to food systems. We're not particularly attempting to be a kind of an academic comprehensive overview, but rather to present to you a whole series of unique perspectives from the different speakers and panelists that we've brought together for this particular term. Many of them are going to be talking about very controversial aspects of the food system, and we feel that that's a really important part of this topic, because this is a system that's in transformation now. A lot of things are changing. A lot of things are being challenged. And so it's a particularly interesting time to engage this topic. So we're learning from people who are academics, working with nonprofits, people who are practitioners, activists, scholars, and who've had a very wide range of experiences across the food system. And we think that that's going to be an extremely valuable breadth of perspectives. And we're hoping we're hoping that all of you, by attending most or all of these sessions, will be able to start to see connections among these different perspectives, and that you, by being able to attend all of these sessions, will be able to integrate multiple types of knowledge, multiple perspectives, so that you can understand what are the major challenges, what are the opportunities for change, and where do we have to be working to create even more than what we already have. In addition, we're integrating theory and practice in ways that have already been mentioned. And we've made a special attempt to increase the diversity of perspectives, and particularly in the lineup of people that we're bringing this year, so that we can hear from a broad range of voices and experiences within both education, practice, and scholarship. So that's just a brief overview of the goals that we have set forth for us in this course, whether you are enrolled as a student or whether you're coming as a community member. Just a couple of, maybe Mariah, if you wanted to say anything about just the nature of, for the community members, what we, how we invite you to register for the class and why we have people registering for the class.
Thank you for all the community members who are attending tonight. We suppose you've probably already seen this, but on the SFSI website, we have an RSVP, and so we'd really appreciate it if you could just share a little bit about yourself and your interest in food systems, and then we'll be able to compile and get a sense of who's been attending throughout the semester. So the registration opens Wednesday, the week before the lecture at 9 a.m., and so if you need any help with that, I'm happy to show you.
Thank you. And we should say also that in addition to gathering information about this becomes very important in our fundraising, because we've done a fair amount of fundraising in order to support the expenses of this course, since we're bringing people from all over the United States, and in at least one case, somebody from outside the United States. And so being able to present to our potential funders, you know, the number of people that the course is serving is very helpful. So those are some of the motivations for gathering information. And this also gives you just a brief overview of some of the people that are coming later in the term. We are starting out with our leadoff speaker is Eric Holt Jimenez, who's coming next week. And he is the director of the nonprofit organization Institute for Food and Development Policy, also known as Food First. He has just written a new book, What Do Foodies Need to Know About Capitalism, which is a really interesting book. And we're asking that for those folks enrolled in the class, that for the assigned reading that goes with his talk next week, he's recommended that reading chapters 1 and 5. Those are one of them is already up on the website. The other one will be by tomorrow. Then we're hearing from a farmer from Montana. We're also then having a panel of local farmers that have various different experiences and perspectives in the area. We've got a leader from the Native American communities, Winona LaDuke, coming in early February. We've got Chef Kabui, who's coming from North Carolina, and also earlier in his life from Kenya. So a very interesting perspectives. Kimberly Seals-Allers coming in late February as a kind of a leader in the breastfeeding movement. Fernando Funes Monsote is coming from Cuba. He is a young, energetic farmer there who is one of the leaders in the sustainable agriculture movement in a country that has been in many ways kind of leading the way to show what happens when a substantial amount of the food production system is oriented around sustainable food production, particularly organic methods. Then we have another one of our panels that is going to focus on food policy and health outcomes. And that's followed by somebody who is an expert on the topic of food waste and wrote the book American Wasteland. And then LaDonna Redmond, who is an activist in the area of gender, race, and food justice. A final panel that is a series of people working on marketing innovations, all locally, which is very important to a more sustainable food system. I'll give you a hint as to, or tell you whom we're trying to get, and it's not 100% confirmed. Congressman Earl Blumenauer, Democrat from Oregon, whose office has written an extremely progressive version of the Farm Bill. And it's very likely that he will come from Washington for this particular time, but I've been in communication with people in his office, and they can't confirm that until about next week when they get a better sense of the schedule. But he's very excited to come and learn about some of the challenges and realities and opportunities that we understand from a Michigan perspective. And then the very last class meeting, it will be Malik and I and our team will be kind of synthesizing many of the things that we've learned. So that gives you a bit of a hint of the wonderful attractions to come. A few things now about housekeeping. For those of you who are enrolled in the class, we've posted the schedule, the assigned readings as such as we know them. We are actually asking the presenters themselves to recommend readings, and we have tangible results from some of them, but not all. And in the meantime, we've put up what we think are reasonable readings for those various meetings, but that may change a little bit as the course proceeds. Wanted to mention, so syllabus and course information that provides a lot of information about the class for students. We wanted to note for people who are concerned that there is a pass-fail option if you're interested. The graded components in the class include participation here. All of the sessions are filmed, so for folks who have an unavoidable conflict and must be away, we have, you will be able to watch the session a couple of days after the actual event, and we do have some guidelines for what people can do to make up their absence from this actual Tuesday evening class, and we'll post that on the campus website as well. We are asking each student, registered student, to post several comments on discussions after 10 of these class meetings, and we have some guidelines about those postings on the course information file that I uploaded earlier today. Then we also are asking every student to write 4 essays, about approximately 1 a month over the term. And the due dates for those are in the course schedule. Guidelines for those essays are in the course information. So take a look at those, and then we can have a short time for Q&A at the end today, and also in later sessions if you have questions about those. We are also, for those of you in this class, giving an extra credit option for attending events in Detroit, and we'll have a list of those available a little bit later this month. We're compiling that now, but those would include such things as volunteering at D-Town Farm later in the term when activities get going on the farm again, or attending the part of the Detroit Food Summit that occurs in early March. So when we provide that list, we will also provide some information about transportation, either using U of M options like the Detroit Connector, or personal vehicles and things of that nature. So these are the things that we're asking those of you enrolled in the class to do as evidence of your activity. Okay, a little bit, Fern, if you want to say something about iClickers. Actually, and then we're going to have some cute, yeah.
All right. If you are a technophobe, as I am, don't panic. How many of you used iClickers, have used them before, who are enrolled in the course? Great, pretty much everybody. So for most of you, this will be very boring, but for a couple of you, it'll be informative. So on Canvas, you should have all the resources, links to all the resources, and a couple of messages I've sent you already on how to make sure that your iClicker is registered with the number on the back of it here. There's a tab on Canvas. You can do that very easily. It looks like a few of you still haven't done that, so make sure to do that as soon as possible. And I'm going to go through some exercises so we can just have some practice. There aren't right or wrong answers to these questions for the most part, but we want to get some practice in. So if you could take out your iClickers and turn them on. And they all should be on channel AA. So those of you who have the older iClickers, that will be automatic. If any of you have been in a class where you know you're on a different channel, you should change that now. And please ask for help for people around you if you're having trouble. If you have an iClicker and it's working and somebody seems to be struggling near you, please reach out and give them some help because it's a big class. Thanks.
Fern, I have this, yeah, if you want. Okay.
Okay, can you hold your clicker in the air when you're ready? Great. So you're going to have 1 minute. Press A, B, C, or D.
You could probably
I see
take a
we
little
can
bit
see the
less, yeah.
numbers, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, okay, fine, yeah. Right. 87, 88. People figuring out how to use them.
All right, it looks like most of you have responded, so I'm going to stop the poll. All right, so a lot of undergrads in the class, some master's students, some PhD students, and the people who are not students didn't have clickers, surprisingly. So. All right, let's do another 30-second. Sorry, I stopped that one a little bit early. All right, have you worked in the restaurant or food service industry?
Wow. That's impressive.
All right, it looks like you all have got the hang of it. I'm going to close that poll. All right. Now, who has worked on a farm? Some people are hitting C and D, so. All right. A lot of people in here have worked on farms.
Good. Great.
All right. Have you ever visited or worked on the UM campus farm? That's it. All right, I see a couple of you haven't responded, but I'm going to close the poll. Let's look at the results there. Okay. I'm also surprised at those numbers. That's pretty good. That's a good number of people. All right. Just a couple more of these to learn more about everyone in the room. If you are from Detroit, elsewhere in Michigan, a different state in the United States, or another country. Okay.
Some wiggling around.
Okay, so this one actually does have a right or wrong answer. You fail the course if you get it wrong. Just kidding. It's all participation, so.
Maybe close it each time so they can't see what other people say.
Oh, that's a good idea. All right, so a lot of people think that it's winter squash. The second runner-up is collard greens. What's the actual correct answer?
Collards.
Collards.
Yay.
Those of you who said B are correct.
Great.
And
Yeah, actually don't know the answer to this.
All right, looks like we've got 2 more questions. We'll run through them really quickly, 20 seconds. So, Michigan ranks 3rd in the nation for number of farmers, true or false? And for true or false, we'll always just have A true, B is false. Hopefully everyone can see the time up there and the number of people who have participated.
I think I looked at a bunch of stats last year.
Ooh.
All right, were people right? Yeah. True, okay. Those of you who said A, you're right. All right, now for our last question in this practice session.
Can you read it out loud?
Yes. What factor has led to Detroit being a national leader in urban agriculture? A, migration of blacks from the South who brought their agricultural heritage with them. B, former Detroit Mayor Coleman A. Young's Farm Lot program. C, the tremendous amount of vacant land in Detroit. D, the Garden Resource Program. Or E, all of the above. We'll go to 45 seconds on this one. All right, so a lot of people said E. Wonderful. We've got some educated folks in this room. I think, so that's all it with iClickers, but if you run into problems, use those resources that I sent you all on Canvas, and there's even an email that you can reach out to for technical support. So
They know that's a part of their participation grade.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
what's that?
They know that's a part of their participation
Oh,
grade.
yeah.
This is a big part of your participation grade in addition to posts on Canvas. So you will want to make sure that you don't forget your iClicker, it has batteries in it, that you bring it every session. And as it says in the course outline, you can't bring someone else's iClicker to class. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Good. Great. You hold on to that. Great. Okay. Let's see now why. For some reason, we are not moving forward. I don't know if there's something that, are we too integrated with the iClickers now to move? What's that? Oh, okay. These on the mouse itself. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Here we go. Oh, actually, we do have one. We should have. Here we go. One last. I don't know if you wanted to say something about that. Yeah. Before we start, we have two short presentations. One for myself and one for Malik. But right before we get to that.
So this course is this is the second year this has happened, and as Catherine mentioned earlier, there's a huge, tremendous amount of support, both from groups at the university as well as external. So we'll just read off. So the United States Department of Agriculture, we got a grant from the USDA, the College of LS&A, and particularly LS&A ISS, who makes all the video recording and live streaming possible. We have support from the Office of the Provost, from the Center for Engaged Academic Learning, the Center for Human Growth and Development, the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies. The Community Foundation of Southeast Michigan is really helping to facilitate a lot of our community interactions with Detroiters. And the Vice Provost Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is also helping to fund this course.
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, so thank you very much to all our sponsors. That's really important for not only their sort of their confidence in the value of this course, but the financial support they've given so that we can do the extra, have the class sessions videotaped and in some cases live streamed so that we can bring people from across the country and so that we can make this available to the community members as well as to students. So I'd like to take a little bit of time now to, I hope, set the stage from my perspective for what we're going to learn about in this class. And so I'm calling this my brief presentation here, Crisis and Opportunity. And although much of what I'm going to say pertains to the food system of the world, and in some cases of the United States in particular, many of the aspects that we're talking about are going on right here in Michigan. And Michigan is not only where we are from and where we live, most of us, at least for the time being. Michigan is the second most agriculturally diverse state in the United States after California. And Michigan is poised, I think, to become even more important potentially as an agricultural role model in its many facets, for better or worse. And because of the tremendous diversity of environments, habitats, soils, farmers, farming experiences, and natural resources that are across the state. And because, unlike California, Michigan is not going to run out of water. And so all the states in the Great Lakes region are going to have abundant water, even if the climate warms substantially, and if we get much longer growing seasons, well then, so much the better as far as food and agriculture are concerned. But Michigan also has a lot going on already in terms of transforming the food system, as evidenced here just by a scene from the Ann Arbor Farmers Market. So there's a lot that's relevant to right where we are. So just start out by saying what we all know from our direct experience, that food is one of those experiences, daily experiences, but also one of those subjects that connects us to land, to the community, to family, to health, to energy, and to the economy. So it pervades really all aspects of our lives in many respects. And that's one of the reasons it's such a fascinating topic to study and to learn more about. And so, for better or worse, the ways in which the food system operates can be either improving many of these connections, or it can be undermining many of these connections. And those are some of the things we're going to want to learn about and discuss. So I want to present today, just very briefly, what I consider some of the major paradoxes in our current food system. The fact that we have a system that produces so much and distributes it so poorly. The fact that it's a source of both overproduction, this vast abundance, and terrible scarcity, that it's a leading cause of environmental degradation, that it's that diets, at least in the United States, are a major cause of illness, when in fact, historically, food and nutrition have been a major source of health, that there are people that are getting tremendously wealthy on the food system, and there are people that are becoming impoverished by the food system. And for the dominant food system has terrible standards of human and animal welfare. But at the same time, we're seeing fantastic transformations occurring all across the country, all across the world, many examples within just minutes of where we are sitting today. And so that's one reason that it's also a very exciting time to be talking about and thinking about the food system, because we have great opportunities for change, and they can be done, and all of us, individually as well as collectively, can be part of that change. So just a little bit of overview. So the global food supply at the present time is about 2,700 calories per person per day. And that is, and so there is plenty of food in principle to feed everybody in the world well. And, but we see, based on the different colors of these different countries in the world, the darker the colors, the greater amount of per capita caloric consumption, so that we have these really dark colors in North America and in parts of Europe at over 3,000 calories per person today. What do we actually need for the average adult, healthy adult, to subsist on a healthy diet, roughly? Roughly 2,000 calories per day, with of course some important exceptions like nursing mothers and lumberjacks and people who are doing really, people who have some really calorically demanding jobs. But for the average person, particularly in our current lifestyles, about 2,000 calories per day. So that means the world is producing an abundant amount of food. However, the discrepancies in all these colors indicate that this is very unevenly distributed around the world. And some parts of the world have an excess of calories consumed, and they have the ability to obtain them. Other parts of the world in some cases getting on the low end of this spectrum to the point of being undernourished. And of course, these are averages for countries, and so we would see within countries, there's a huge spectrum as well. I don't want to suggest that everybody in all of these countries conforms to these mean values. Ironically, across the world today, there are now, at this point in time, let me see if I can get rid of this little, just want to get the iClicker stuff out of here for the time being. We will come back to it one more time. There are more people in the world now that are overweight than are malnourished, yet there's a very substantial number of chronically hungry people in the world, almost 1 billion people. And although that number has gone down a little bit over the last couple of decades, and there have been global policies to try to reduce that number substantially, it is staying at close to 1 billion people. So this is a real tragedy, and it's completely unnecessary in a world that produces so much food. Yes?
Overweight and malnutrition are not mutually exclusive. There are
That's true.
overweight people who are malnourished.
That's true. Exactly. Very good point. It's possible to be, I'm thinking when I say, in this case, I'm talking about people who don't have enough calories that they consume per day. It is quite possible to be overweight and malnourished as well. The dominant food system that produces our food is the industrial food system, in the sense that it dominates the land area and it dominates the resources in the food system. And this food production system is characterized by substantial synthetic inputs of synthetic fertilizers, synthetic pesticides, by high mechanization, by crops that have been specially developed to survive very well in this kind of production system, and by considerable mechanization. So it takes an enormous input of resources in order to manage farms in this way, but these are where many of the resources lie in the industrial food system. Yet ironically, if we look at the amount of food the food that people around the world eat, small-scale family farms like this one, which is in southern Mexico, grow most of the food that people eat. So what is happening in this system? Well, this system is growing a huge amount of food, or a huge amount of potential food that is being consumed by livestock, it's being consumed as biofuels, and it's being consumed and being used for various industrial purposes. Most of the food that is grown in the industrial food system does not directly go to feed people. It only indirectly goes to feed people, or it goes to other purposes altogether. So that's definitely a question that we need to be coming back to time and again over the semester. Is this the best use of our land and our resources, given all of the other problems that are attached to them? But in fact, the small-scale family farms grow most of the food that people are eating directly. And that's, in a sense, good news, because many of these farms are already using food production methods that are quite different from those in the industrial food system. This, for example, is an organic farm in Chiapas, Mexico, that features many of the principles of sustainable food production. Lots of diversity, no synthetic inputs, managing soil fertility with things like compost and animal manures. The diversity itself is preventing the outbreak of pests, and it's also fostering a lot of the local biodiversity that is occurring. Things like birds, small mammals, insects. A lot of those that are living in the local forests are able to persist in small, very diversified farms like this. Most livestock animals in the world are now raised in confinement animal feeding operations. That's what this term CAFOs mean. This is a photograph from a Michigan farm. And these animals spend none of their lives outdoors. They spend all of their lives in some kind of an artificial environment. And this is true for Michigan, it's true for much of the United States, it's true for most of the world at this point. And just to pursue examples in Michigan, a farm like that will have outside those huge barns where there might be thousands of cows, huge manure lagoons. This is an aerial photo of a farm like that from Lenawee County, which is the county to the south of where we are right now. So, so these have huge manure lagoons. These manure, so what happens, this is manure that accumulates over a period of several months from these animals that are in confinement. Every day, various kinds of front loaders will scoop out and scrape it, haul that manure away. It will be stored in these, but they can't store this forever. They have to do something with it. So several times a year, enormous equipment, big trucks come. They sort of suck up the sludge and the liquid manure from here, and they spray it on farm fields that are growing things like corn, soybeans, wheat, the row crops that are typical of Michigan. But these fields can only absorb so much manure. Manure is potentially a wonderful resource, but over and over, these fields get saturated. Those nutrients go into the soil, they go into the groundwater, they go into the local streams, they run downstream, and they keep going. And so they end up in places like this. So who recognizes what this picture is? Okay, somebody tell me, yeah. Okay, first of all, where is it? What are we looking at? Lake Erie. This is Lake Erie. Yes, this is a dead zone. What are all these things? Algal blooms. These are harmful algal blooms from 2017. And this is all the downstream effect of the excessive manure loading on farm fields in the watersheds that are draining into the western Lake Erie Basin. And so some of those are coming directly from the farm photographs that I just showed you. And so there are several river watersheds that are draining from Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana that all empty into western Lake Erie Basin. And over the last several years, that excessive nutrient loading has led to these harmful algal bloom outbreaks summer after summer. These are happening in other parts of the Great Lakes region, in Saginaw Bay, in other parts, in inland lakes in Michigan. And these are, of course, this is going to be more and more a phenomenon of the future because the harmful algal blooms are sensitive to warming temperatures unless we can get a grip on the sources of this extreme enrichment upstream, which has yet to happen in any really viable way. Well, turning to a different topic, but the one that brought me into an engagement with the food system years ago, is the fact that agriculture is the leading cause of habitat transformation and species endangerment around the world. And it's because if we look at, say, this aerial view of Nebraska, the vast areas of land, almost half of the Earth's terrestrial land surface, have been converted from their native vegetation into highly managed landscapes like these. Now, not all of those transformations necessarily lead to the extinction of species and ecosystems, but when we have those once diverse ecosystems converted into monocultures, that are then treated with synthetic pesticides and herbicides and biocides year after year, then we have a huge local, regional, and larger areas that are in which the native biodiversity is suppressed, killed, and or driven out in one way or another. And so that is the reason that agriculture has such a huge impact on biodiversity. It is possible with very diversified farming systems to have large areas of lightly transformed landscape that actually could incorporate native biodiversity. So there are sustainable alternatives to what we have here. On a totally different topic then, but again, one of these paradoxes, that in the United States today, 4 of the major leading causes of death are diet related. And so with data from the Centers for Disease Control, heart disease, several kinds of cancers, stroke, and diabetes are related to the foods we eat, and both the kinds of foods and the amounts of foods that we eat. And you've probably many of you have seen this kind of unfortunate commentary about our current times, and that because, well, I would say not just obesity rates, just because of the changing kind of health profiles of people in the United States. This is the first generation of children who will probably live shorter lives than their parents. And so even a month ago or so, I was hearing on the radio data about lifetime survivorship in the United States, and that has inched down slightly again last year relative to the year before, and much of that is related to is food and diet related. 1 in 3 Americans born in 2000 will develop diabetes. Now, ironically, we have dietary guidelines, and these are this My Plate icon on the left represents the dietary guidelines that come from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And these are not even particularly progressive dietary guidelines. They are not in full confirmation, for example, with what you would get recommended from a school of public health. But nonetheless, they're a reasonable baseline. And so these relative proportions on this plate are supposed to indicate the relative proportions of the USDA's recommended daily consumption. But let's look at the subsidies that the American food system, that the US government is putting into the food system in comparison to this allocation here. So we see for protein, which would include meat and dairy, and of course other options than meat and dairy, we see that this is a relatively small part of My Plate, but look, 63% of the subsidies are supporting the growth of meat and dairy products. Grains, 20%, that's a little bit smaller than the allocation here. Sugar, starches, oil, alcohol, that barely even appears in any particular category here, but it's getting 15% of the subsidies. And then fruits, vegetables, which are half of this, are getting less than 1% of the subsidies. Yes?
That 20% for grain, does that also include grain that's going to the feeding of animals or to the meat and dairy?
Good. That entails the grain that is going to the feeding. That's a good question. That is going to the feeding of animals. Yes. So, in other words, the proportions we have here in the recommended guidelines, and then what the government is actually supporting in terms of foods that are being raised in the United States, are quite out of synchrony. And that's one of the ways in which our federal policies could be brought into much better alignment. And so that's certainly one of the challenges for the future. We have the illusion, particularly when we go to a big supermarket, that we have a vast number of choices, plentiful, cheap, nutritious food. This particular image is meant to show you many of the different items that are primarily made of corn. It turns out 1/4 of the items in the typical supermarket are made of corn, either through various transformations of the grains themselves or substantially composed of high fructose corn syrup. And so it turns out that much of the notion of whether this is plentiful, nutritious, and even cheap is a bit of an illusion. Somebody's phone here. Oh, sorry. So now, given all of that and all of this abundance of food, let's take a moment for our last iClicker question. And the question now is, what proportion of the food dollar that we might spend at that supermarket is actually going back to the farmer who grew the food? So you get 3 choices here, and Fern can help us with the technology. Sorry. Oh, okay. Sure. Yep. Here's where we learn how to work out the little wrinkles here. Yeah. Yep. Okay, sorry, I may have clicked out of that by accident.
All right, here we go. So I can start it and stop it from there.
Okay.
You can go back to
Okay, great. Okay, so let's do 30 seconds. Yeah, I don't think it'll. Here we go. There we go. Great. So our question: what proportion of the food dollar goes to the farmer? You have 3 choices here: 50%, 30%, 10%. We'll give you 30 seconds. Oh, got a lot of answers already. Let's close it at 25 then. 25 seconds, and we'll see what you said. Good, you're right. That's right. Let's see here if we can, if I can close out this answer. Good for you. Here are data from just a couple of years ago from the USDA, Economic Research Service, and their report is actually harking back to 2014 data, but so the food dollar, only about 10 cents on the food dollar is actually going to the farmer. And the rest is going to many other things: food services, retail, wholesale, packaging, transportation, processing, energy, finance, advertising, and other things. So, and that's a real dilemma for farmers. That's because it is very hard for farmers to make a living. And so what I want to do to kind of wrap up, the sort of overview of the system we have now is to let you know if you Google this title, after we've left the class, 10 Things That a Bushel of Wheat Won't Buy, you'll find a really interesting short video by a farmer from, I believe, Kansas, who has indicated a whole number of things that a bushel of wheat, which sells for $3.27, valued, he thinks, at more than, and that's only about a fifth of its value in terms of the resources that have actually gone into it. His costs of production, his time, and so forth. So it won't buy a loaf of bread, of this kind of bread. It won't buy what we see in these various these panels. It won't buy even a large set of number of 10-pack of toilet paper. And what this is relevant to is a very sobering and sad fact about the United States and other countries as well, that the suicide rate among farmers is twice as high of that of any other profession, and is higher than that for veterans. I mean, now it shouldn't be high for any occupation as an occupation. That's a terrible commentary. But there are similar data now for a number of other developed and developing countries. And this is because of the tremendous stresses that farmers are living with on a daily basis. And this is surely one of many signs that we have a system that is not working well for really everybody in it. So finally, just an interesting comment from Michael Pollan, who always has a lot of interesting insights about the food system, just about the notion of cheap food. In the United States, you probably, since you're already so savvy and you know about the food dollar, we spend the average American spends a smaller proportion of their household income on food than any other country in the world. And there are a lot of aspects of our food policy that have shaped the illusion we have that at the checkout counter that food is cheap. And yet it is really, as this comment says, there is no such thing as cheap food. The real cost is paid somewhere. If it's not paid at the cash register, then it's paid in many other parts of our world. It's paid in environmental cleanup, it's paid in our health system, it's paid in the form of subsidies. And so one of the major challenges we have is to try to bring the real value back into the food system in a way that enables farmers to have a good living, but at the same time enables everyone to have access to good, healthy, nutritious food. So with all these problems, this system is ripe for transformation, and that's what we want to focus on for most of the semester. So just a couple of brief thoughts about transforming the food system. Within the United States and many other areas, there's a big increase in small-scale diversified farms that are using ecological principles for raising plants and animals. A lot of that's happening right here in Michigan. There are new alliances of farmers and social justice movements and new forms of farmer-to-farmer exchange of knowledge, which are very encouraging. There are whole new principles of what the food system should be aiming for. Food sovereignty, that not only would guarantee that people have access to healthy food, but that they're able to produce and grow that food in a manner that's consistent with their own places, their cultural needs, and their cultural wishes. There are new places where food is being grown. There is now this huge urban agriculture movement. Detroit is a leader in that movement. We'll hear about that very shortly. And there are some very innovative programs for increasing food access. One that is really neat in the sense that it originated in Michigan through the Fair Food Network. It's called the Double Up Food Bucks program, which is now in more than 150 sites across Michigan, and is now in 18 states, and is even supported by the Farm Bill. It's basically use a dollar on a bridge card, get that money doubled in purchasing local fresh produce from these various sites, and it's up to $20 a day for all practitioners. So it's been extremely important in increasing access of low-income families to healthy, locally grown, nutritious food. And so finally, to just conclude my portion, is to say this whole system of our whole global food system is ripe for change, and we're going to be talking over the next 13 weeks about some of the big ideas about how to make constructive changes in the food system. With that, I want to turn the podium over to Malik, and he will give a presentation as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Catherine. I'm going to really speed through this. I probably have too many slides for the time that we have left, so forgive me because I'm going to move really fast. If I can figure out how to work this. Which one is forward?
This is usually forward, although it seems stuck now, and I had that same problem before. Let's see, well, I had an idea,
Maybe I should.
which was to click on, there we go.
Okay, I'll
I
just.
think that will work.
Okay. So Catherine gave an excellent overview of some of the challenges facing the food movement, the food system rather, and some of the opportunities also. I'm convinced that if there's going to be fundamental change, it's going to come at the people level as a result of the movement that we create to make that change. And so this presentation is called A Food Movement Scan, Detroit and Beyond. That's still not working. So some people would argue, some friends of mine, that a food movement doesn't exist. And they say that a movement needs to have broadly agreed upon goals and policy objectives. And we don't have that type of broad agreement within what some people would call the food movement. I would argue, however, that we do have a burgeoning food movement and that there is some general agreement regarding the importance of localizing food systems, of regenerative agricultural practices, and of the right of all human beings to have high quality food. So clearly we have a lot to do for that movement to coalesce and have more broadly agreed upon goals. It's a conspiracy. Oh, okay. So I want to talk to you about the current Detroit landscape. As Catherine said, Detroit is a leader in the urban agricultural movement. And in fact, I want to also shout out a couple people, Sister Tiffany, who works at D-Town Farm, Brother Akello, throw your hands up, who worked with our Food Warriors program. And I saw Jess somewhere. She promised me she wasn't going to sit in the back this semester, but she's sitting in the back, who also worked with us for several weeks this summer. So one of the major organizations doing this work in Detroit is Earthworks Urban Farm. Earthworks is Detroit's first, go, you can make some noise. Okay. Earthworks is Detroit's first certified organic farm, runs an excellent internship program, and does a number of other things. The Greening of Detroit, although in the last couple of years has had some serious financial difficulties, continues to be a leader in Detroit with their Farm Apprentice program and their Build a Garden program. Keep Growing Detroit is a major organization that has helped to move this work forward, primarily through their Garden Resource Program, which now includes more than 1,400 gardens and small farms. They provide seeds, they provide transplants, they provide access to compost, topsoil, and tools, and have really created a model, which is a national model on how to expand an urban agricultural movement. They also have what's called the Urban Roots Training Program. A number of Detroit farmers have gone through that program, and they have a collective where Detroiters are able to sell together through the Grown in Detroit Cooperative, and they run the Plum Street Market Garden as well. As I mentioned earlier, I lead the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. We do a number of things, the largest and most labor-intensive of which is D-Town Farm, a 7-acre farm in Detroit's Rouge Park where we grow more than 30 different fruits and vegetables and herbs. We run a youth program, the Food Warriors Youth Development Program, because we're absolutely convinced that not only do our farming practices have to be sustainable, but our movement building has to be sustainable as well, that we need to get young people involved and fired up and passionate about creating a better food system. We also have a lecture series, and the big project we've been working on for several years now is the Detroit Food Commons, a new building that we're building on Woodward and Euclid in Detroit's North End, the cornerstone of which will be the Detroit People's Food Co-op. We also have a number of small family farmers in the city of Detroit. In fact, there's some family farmers in Detroit who really detest nonprofits and detest getting grants from foundations and what have you, and have decided not to go that route. And I respect that. I'm not in that crew. We do accept funding from foundations, but I respect their position. And so pictured here you see Keith and Diane Hoy, who run Ohana Gardens in Highland Park. And here you see Olivia and Greg Willer, who you'll be hearing from later this month as part of the panel on new farmers. So they both run operations and are able to support themselves through their growing. But there's much more happening in Detroit besides just the agriculture. We have the Detroit Food Policy Council, which we heard about earlier. We have Food Lab Detroit, headed by Davita Davison, which is in many ways an incubator and a training program for food entrepreneurs. They currently have more than 200 people who have come through their program who have learned to create small-scale businesses, producing value-added items, many of which are in retail outlets throughout the city. And also you have some folks who are operating restaurants, like the operators of Detroit Vegan Soul, who have come through that program as well. Detroit also is home of Eastern Market, one of the oldest public markets in the United States. And although it is currently managed by the Eastern Market Corporation, it's still owned by the city of Detroit. There's a number of troubling issues. One of the issues that a number of farmers are facing and are pushing back against now is the assessment of sewerage and drainage charges. So I'll give you an example at D-Town Farm. In August, we got a water bill for about $1,500 for one of our 3 water lines. And when we looked closely at the bill, what the bill suggested was that the amount of water that we got from the city's water lines equaled the amount of water that we were putting back into the city's sewage system. Yeah, so there's no logic to that, right? Because clearly farms are permeable surfaces which are diverting water from the city's stormwater management system. And so in a sense, we probably should be getting a credit. But not only that, at D-Town Farm, we have a rainwater retention pond where we're collecting about 50,000 gallons of rainwater. So this is a problem. The water department doesn't seem to quite understand the role that farms are playing in diverting water from the stormwater sewage system. And so for small farmers in particular, who are not getting grants from the Kellogg Foundation, this can be a make or break situation if you're hit with these huge sewage bills. In fact, about 75% of the water bill in Detroit is for sewerage. A major problem, not only in Detroit, but throughout the United States and throughout the world, is the question of land ownership and access to land. I'm sure when Eric comes next week, he's going to talk about that. In addition to the book he wrote on capitalism, he also edited a book which was published last year called Land Justice. And the reality is that displacing people from their lands has historically been one of the ways that people have been put into a food insecure position. And we see this trend continuing both in rural areas and also in urban areas. In urban areas, what we're seeing is typically the influx of capital and the development in select areas in places like the city of Detroit, which is commonly called gentrification. It typically prices out residents. New residents move in who are typically young and white and part of what Richard Florida called the creative class. And so this is affecting farmers because in the city of Detroit, although about 1/3 of the city's 139 square miles is vacant land, it's very difficult for local growers to get access to get ownership or access to that land to grow and to have some type of long-term security for the land. Urban planners in the city of Detroit seem to still be following the logic that agriculture is a good temporary use of land until real development comes along, like somebody wanting to build a parking structure. We have this pervasive problem of lack of access to capital, which is not only a problem in agriculture, but is a problem in all areas of development in American life. And there's a certain logic to the capitalist system which suggests that if you already have wealth or you already have access to money or you have access to something which is worth money, then you are deemed capital ready and you can go to a bank or another lending institution and you can get a loan. For example, let's say you want to create a small produce store and it's going to cost you $1 million to build this store and to stock it and to meet your expenses for the first year. So you go to the bank, you want to get $1 million loan. The reality is you already have to have $1 million or something worth $1 million because the bank wants to make sure that if you default on the loan, they have something that they can take from you. And so that logic creates a situation where those who have continued access to capital are those who already have capital, and those who have limited access to capital ain't got nothing coming. We also have the pervasive and continuing problem of the system of white supremacy in the United States. And often when people hear this term, they think about the Ku Klux Klan and groups like that that are overtly racist groups. But I'm talking about something much more subtle than that. I'm talking about a system which is really a global system that grows out of imperialism that continues to give advantage to people who are defined as being white. Now, the reality is that race is not a scientific reality, but it is a social construct that is real within our lives. And so we find that in all the indicators of human life in the United States, that people who are considered to be white tend to fare better than black folks and other people of color. And so this impacts the food movement and the food system as well. So there's some things that have happened in Detroit in the last year that I just want to highlight. One of those was the departure from Detroit of Betty Wiggins. Betty Wiggins was the executive director of school nutrition for the Detroit Public Schools. And after being put under investigation by the Detroit Public School system because she had found many creative ways to use the money she was generating from school meals in order to not only implement creative programs in the Detroit Public Schools, for example, the Drew Farm, which is at what was formerly called Drew Middle School, or the about 120 small gardens that were at schools in the city of Detroit and various other programs that she was able to implement. Because of her creativity, there was some suspicion that she was doing something that was illegal. She was investigated. Of course, they found nothing. She was operating with the highest integrity. But because of the investigation, her hands were tied. She wasn't able to continue spending with these innovative programs. She decided that she had had enough and decided to move to Houston. Many of us were very concerned about making sure that the gains that were achieved under Betty's leadership were maintained, and have had a series of meetings with leadership of the Detroit Public Schools, and we were assured that those gains will stay in place, but we'll continue to monitor that. Another promising note that's taken place in the last year is the Metro Times newspaper, which I guess is still Detroit's alternative newspaper. It's become much more mainstream than it was when it first started, but nonetheless, when compared to the Detroit News or the Detroit Free Press, it certainly is an alternative. And so a writer by the name of Tom Perkins has done an amazing series of articles about various aspects of the food system, including focusing on new restaurants, focusing on urban agriculture, focusing on food justice. Some of the articles that I'm highlighting here are an article he did on romaine lettuce being linked to E. coli, highlighting what he called the McNichols Soul Food Strip. McNichols is a street in Detroit, in fact, where our office is located, and there's a number of Caribbean restaurants on that street. And then an article that I really think deserves a wider read, and that's an article he did on urban farming and colonialism in Detroit's North End neighborhood, where he focused on the infamous MUFI, the Michigan Urban Farming Initiative. Read the article. Another significant happening is the closure of Detroit's Market Garden. So Detroit's Market Garden was located near Eastern Market, and it was operated by the Greening of Detroit. I mentioned that the Greening of Detroit had some severe financial problems in the last 2 years, and they had put several $100,000 into remediating the soil at this site. In fact, what they had done was dug up several feet of soil and trucked in truckloads, dozens and dozens and dozens of truckloads of clean soil. And so it's just really a shame that now that site is just sitting fallow. Another promising highlight is the partnership which has been developed between the University of Michigan Sustainable Food System Initiative, the Detroit Food Policy Council, and the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. And so far that partnership is manifested in 3 ways. In October, we sponsored a panel in conjunction with the Land Justice Book Tour that Eric Holt Gimenez was doing to highlight the importance of land as we're looking at how we create equity within the food system. In November, we had a forum that dealt with disability justice for Detroit farms and gardens. We are trying to highlight the importance of making farms and gardens accessible to all. And I just want to lift up Sister Tiffany Harvey, who worked very hard on not only that forum, but worked with us at D-Town Farm in implementing a ramp so that it's wheelchair accessible. And we want to try to model that and encourage others who are involved in agriculture to begin to think more critically about how they might make their farms more inclusive and accessible. And then finally, as has already been discussed, the programming related to this course, which is happening in the city of Detroit, is happening as a result of this partnership. On the national level, there's a few things that have happened that are noteworthy as well. One of those is December 5th through 7th, there was a conference in Boston called the Community Food Systems Conference. And this conference was significant because it attempts to pick up where an organization that was called the Community Food Security Coalition left off. That organization folded 6 or 7 years ago, but it was really the major convener of people doing food security and food justice work throughout the United States. One of the major organizers of that conference was Andy Fisher, who was the executive director formerly of the Community Food Security Coalition. While this conference was happening in Boston, something else happened in New York State. And this is sometimes being referred to as the incident at Stone Barns Farm. There were a number of fellows, Stone Barn fellows, who were gathered to hear various speakers. And one of those speakers was Mark Bittman, who was a former New York Times food writer and has been really, I think, a progressive ally in many ways in the food movement. All my interactions with him have been very positive, I'll say that. He was confronted during the Q&A session by another very good friend of mine, Nadine Nelson, who was a chef out of Connecticut. And Nadine asked him, how do you hold yourself accountable to communities of color and vulnerable communities, to the things you say that you aspire to change? Mark Bittman was basically silent. He basically didn't have a response, which created a huge controversy. He issued an apology the next day, which is also worth reading. And all this stuff has been written about if you want to Google this. But it has surfaced a conversation that needs to be surfaced about who leads the food movement. Are wealthy white men the spokespersons for the food movement? And again, this is not knocking Mark Bittman because I think he's been an ally and has helped to move the ball down the field. But again, it surfaced a very important conversation. Another significant event has been the emergence of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. Don't try to read all that stuff. If you're interested, go to the website, blackfoodjustice.org, blackfoodjustice.org, blackfoodjustice.org. You can learn about this emerging national organization which is organizing a number of black growers throughout the United States. This is a picture of the leadership team of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. If you'd like more information, that's how you can get in touch. You want to end it up?
Well, I know the hour is late, and that's it for our presentations. We will be around for a few minutes if you have any questions about logistics, but I hope we've been able to review those sufficiently that you can go to the course website for students and look at the information we've posted about the terms. See you all next week.